my main contribution to all this is about every 3 months I say executive board, and I want some of these damn ships going down.
We want disasters.
I know you did. I want disasters. Damn it, things break. They don't work right.
Things blow
No, I'm saying
up.
this because I'm a storyteller myself. The natural tendency of a storyteller is to make things
Better.
work. It is. It's to make
But I'm not like that.
yeah.
I love to break things.
Well, which of course was why I came up with the St. Philip stuff, so that I could have industrial accident after industrial accident for the Society of St. Philip to investigate. So
But the other point actually.
Oh, so you call him the Exorcist? Get behind me, Murphy.
I want to make a point earlier in regard to what Tim was raising. There's another phenomenon, which is that once an industry gets widespread enough, a whole infrastructure, it's actually what Chuck was talking about, you get an infrastructure built up around that industry. Once that happens, there's an enormous amount of inertia that makes it hard to shift away from that industry, even if abstractly something's better. It's the reason why it's going to be very hard to move away from gasoline engines, because whatever their problems may be, within every 4 blocks you drive in a city, there's a gas station. And whereas if you're going to talk about replacing it with something else, it's one of the problems they have, assuming they could develop a hydrogen fuel cell, is, well, then fine, where do you,
Where's the hydrogen station?
You're right, where's the hydrogen station? They don't have it. And building that network, it exists now for gasoline. Now the point is that if you start with a world like 1632, where there are reasons that lighter than air travel becomes much more prominent, much more widespread than it did in ours, then there'll actually be an inertia to keep it going. Even once it becomes easier to do heavier than air, you'll probably still keep seeing lighter than air lasting a long, long time. They're actually bringing it back. My father,
It's got a good niche. It's got a good niche. There are going to be some people who are going to take the plane because it's even faster than the light.
It's always, the plane is always faster.
Wouldn't you define that as part of the perversity, the sheer inertia of bureaucracy that develops around the technology? And, I mean, that would be, I would think,
well, but it's not just, no, that's one phenomenon, which is vested interest. And I did work for Lockheed. If anyone wants to know who the biggest welfare queen is in the United States, I work for them. And I can describe to you as a machinist in great detail, if you want to listen to it, exactly how on a day-to-day basis Lockheed screws the American taxpayer. Every time, every minute. And it's legal. It's all perfectly legal. But anyway, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about institutional inertia. I'm talking about the inertia of the customer. The average person driving a car is not going to switch over, for instance, to an electric car.
Prius
it's a royal
really
pain in the butt to recharge it, and they gotta find us. I remember I bought one of the first VWs when they first came in
the
United States, and it was a pain in the ass if you weren't a mechanic yourself, which I wasn't, trying to find a mechanic who would repair it. I can remember having my VW Bug break down in Idaho and coming to a small town and trying to get a mechanic, and they would just look at that thing and say, I don't do that. I don't do these foreign cars.
Tucker's a good example.
There
of
are
what
also
happens when you try
issues.
to turn.
There are also issues of, if you will, it's kind of an industrial pyramid and an expertise pyramid effect. Not everybody can undertake all kinds of projects. How many countries in the world can afford to and have a reason to operate airports? Okay, fine. How many can actually build something as simple as a Piper Cub? Actually, a surprising number. How many can build a pretty good large-sized passenger aircraft?
a DC-3.
Yeah. How many can build a huge passenger aircraft? Apparently, even consortiums have a hard time with it. If you know the story of Airbus recently. How many can actually build a rocketry program? And then you have to ask, we're not talking anymore about sounding rockets, low Earth orbit access, etc. We're talking punch out to geosync and beyond. And the number shrinks. And then you start you look at how much does it cost? What are the expertises needed? There is so much infrastructure in essence that needs to be in place in addition to this objective before it's pursued, to make the objective possible. If you, okay, I can do it, I got the engineers for it. Yeah, do you have the computer programmers? Well, we really hadn't crossed it. Don't come back and talk to me later. Now, tell me when you've got that society. One of the reasons I bring this up is I think that there's going to be, to follow what Gord was saying, an interesting effect, which is I do suspect that the downtimers will stay with Hotter Than Air for a longer period of time, more locally, because it can be done. It is one of the reasons it's so inefficient, by the way, is your lift costs your fuel. And that is the immense part of your payload. You burn 3 times as, something like 3 or 4 times as much mass of fuel as you actually deliver to site. The moment you've got helium or lighter than air, literally a lighter than air gas in there, now your fuel is propulsion. And that's a whole different ball of wax. Because of that, just to wrap up, how many places are going to be able to make the hydrogen industry and support it and in enough amount? It's going to be a lot easier, a lot longer at the local level to do the hot air.
Also, in the development sequence that Chuck's described, with that idea of the hot air semi-rigid dirigible that's going to go 70 to 100 miles in a day. And so you've got that, he said, take the map of Europe, start drawing lines between towns with your compass set at
Google Earth. You can do it. Google Earth.
But the point is,
That's how I did it,
and
too.
start drawing lines and draw your
just take a
network,
little
okay?
line thing
Now,
from here to here.
remember that in our world, the railroads were all built long before the first dirigibles came into being, right? But downtime, in the 1632 universe, the number of miles of railroad are minuscule. And even using the Patiala tramway technique, which has less than half the requirement for steel, even using that, your infrastructure cost for building a mile of that rail is incredibly high.
And you have to maintain it.
And that doesn't even get into land use or who owns it or
he will have
legal.
a network of dirigible fields and dirigible supply points and dirigible freight warehouses and dirigible scheduling agents scattered all across Europe before we've got 1,000 miles of railroad.
That's
I
right.
remember the very best distance rail by hand-built rail ever created was 11 miles in one day, and that was in the race between the Union Pacific and
The Transcon.
and the Central Pacific on the first transcontinental.
We have a question back there. Yeah.
Couldn't we expect to see a larger buildup of dirigibles in areas that have more efficient fuel, such as oil, coal, possibly uptimers with natural gas?
Fuel really doesn't, well, okay, fuel matters for ICEs, but I'm a steam proponent and they don't care what you burn in fuel. I've got an idea for a story where I want to sail my airship around town burning bacon fat to make them hungry to go to my wife.
I told you no! I told you.
Yeah.
Well, as somebody mentioned the other day, every tree in Germany has a name.
Yes.
What are you going to burn?
Coal.
Oil.
Coal and oil.
Okay.
All you
Butter.
do is produce heat.
You've got to move directly to coal and oil.
Do
You're
you
not going to be
remember-
able to burn wood.
I have
Do you
a.
remember how earlier on we were saying one of the books is going to the Caribbean? If you ever looked at it, petrol. So your point, very well taken.
And then you have to move it.
Not taken. It's not out there in a vacuum.
Chuck
Very
and I
much.
have got Tony's agreement, we haven't got the contract yet, but they will be, working title is Commander Cantrell in the West Indies.
and the
Wait a
actual
minute,
books. You know?
You're burning rum?
No, actually, Trinidad has a sizable oil reserve.
I know.
And they
Available.
have, right now, Trinidad has one of the largest operating oil
Yeah, but at
refineries in
some
the world.
point,
Without a
he's gonna
gantry,
have
without
to write the sequence. Where remember, we got to have things go wrong. And of all of the authors that I've ever had the pleasure of beta reading for, this man enjoys writing things that go wrong.
Yeah, that's true.
You know,
I
I mean, when the very first thing you ever sent me, my response to you was, "Would they really do that?" And you went, "Oh yeah." So, you know, he's gonna. Inevitably, you're going to have the guys who end up burning sugarcane. You know, I mean.
Oh, they'll be. Yeah,
Well, no, they do that already.
All right, I have a comment. I think in all this technology, the biggest problem you're going to have is the technophobe. I graduated from college before the personal computer, so I have a whole group of my friends who have been for 20 years or 30 years afraid to touch a computer because it was just too much to absorb. So I don't think that there are going to be a lot of downtimers who are going to jump onto the technology thing. They're going to avoid it in a religious fashion.
But the teenagers won't.
That's true. I agree. And the next generation is going to be hot for it.
Hold on,
The
wait,
problem there is your friends have the luxury of ignoring it.
If it's there
In
and
the
it's
milieu
faster,
that we're
they
talking
have to
about
use it.
here, if you don't compete, you don't eat.
It's also
Eric had a point.
a cultural thing. I mean,
It is.
one of the things that struck me, the last real job I had was working in a machine shop in Northwest Indiana, mid-90s. And I myself didn't, being a technophobe, I didn't get a computer until I decided to go back to writing in 1992. And the only reason I did it was because I didn't
They weren't
really
selling.
want the gadget, but on the other hand, because I had written in times past, I knew exactly how much of a pain in the ass it
They were
was
no
to use
longer
a
selling typewriters.
Well, even if I had one, I knew what a pain in the ass typewriters were.
Yeah.
Correct, okay.
You know, so I figured I would force myself to learn how to use a word processing program. But what struck me in that machine shop, and this is a solid Northwest Indiana blue collar population. I'm sure I was the only one there. I know I was the only one there who had a college degree, which I did not tell my boss because he would have hired me if he known that I had it.
Yeah, so qualified.
Yeah, right. I was over, you know, he would have said, what the hell are you doing here? And, you know, it's hard to explain it. Well, for
I'm
reasons
earning a
having to do
living.
with my political history, never mind. But the point is, I'm 50, and this is a trade I now don't know how to do. So, anyway, forget all that. But it was striking to me how many of those guys, including men my age or older, loved computers, had them. One guy I worked with was doing all kinds of fancy graphic stuff. Every time a new computer came out, he'd not only buy it, he'd learn how the damn thing worked and the logic of it. So, you know, it's kind of funny. It partly depends on this is a population that's used to working with gadgetry. I mean, you know, they do it all the time.
They have
They're
mechanical
fixing their
tool,
own
yeah.
cars since they were 2, you know. And computers are kind of approaching the same way. So I think you're going to get subcultures of the population that are going to do much the same kind of thing. They'll jump all over it, and it doesn't honestly matter that much. Even to this day, somebody just did I read this study about a year and a half ago. The big majority of Americans, most Americans that have a computer, use it to play games and email.
It's because they're bored.
And that's it.
They
Honestly.
have nothing else to do.
Yeah.
When it gets nighttime, what are you gonna do?
There's
Well,
nothing
if
on
you got
TV.
something interesting.
It's become,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
actually,
make more population.
I don't know if anybody's done a study of it, but I'm willing to bet it's actually been, time has been shifted away. People are complaining that, well, we're no longer social anymore because everybody glued their own computer. I think those same amount of time used to be spent glued watching a TV screen.
Yeah, so we still were not
You know, so you
social.
might have been sitting next to your old lady, but I mean, you know, you weren't talking, you were just watching, you know, whatever's on a booth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the favorite moments in the series was when the French came up with percussion caps when the Granville folks did. That was a nice piece of writing.